Welcome to Safe on Deck. For episode 15, I sat down with Rear Admiral Kyle Cozad in his office at the National Naval Aviation Museum. The Admiral graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1985 before reporting to Naval Air Station Pensacola to begin his career in naval aviation. His time in the Maritime Patrol and Reconnaissance Aircraft, or MPRA fleet, spanned all 4 MPR sites, including time at Patrol Squadron 23 in Maine, Patrol Squadron 9 in Hawaii, Command of Patrol Squadron 40 in Washington State, and Command of Patrol and Reconnaissance Wing 11 in Florida. The Admiral has served extensively as a P-3 Orion instructor pilot, during multiple operational tours in the fleet, on 2 tours with Patrol Squadron 30, the P-3 FRS, and on 1 tour with the Canadian Air Force's 404 Squadron in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, where he flew as a CP-140 Aurora exchange instructor pilot. The Admiral's shore tours include time at Navy Personnel Command as an aviation commander and captain detailer, a tour as the 22nd Senior Director of the White House Situation Room, and as a Chief of Naval Operations Fellow on the CNO's Strategic Studies Group. As a flag officer, Admiral Cozad served on the Joint Staff in Norfolk, as Commander of Joint Task Force Guantanamo, and as Commander of Patrol and Reconnaissance Group and Patrol and Reconnaissance Group Pacific. In July of 2017, Admiral Cozad was selected to be the 19th Commander of Naval Education and Training Command. Following his retirement from the Navy, Admiral Cozad was named as the President and CEO of the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation, where he and his staff work tirelessly to preserve, protect, and share the storied history of naval aviation. Thanks as always for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, episode 15 with Rear Admiral Kyle Cozad. Enjoy. Kyle, where were you born?
I was born in Chadron, Nebraska, a sleepy little town in the west side of the state. My folks both went to college there. My dad was a basketball player. Mom was the, head of the cheerleading squad. And quite frankly, we moved away, and that was the smallest town we ever lived in.
Sounds like an all-American family from the way you're describing it.
Yeah, kind of Ozzie and Harriet growing up. As I have 2 brothers and a sister, and we were the type of family. My folks both ended up as teachers, and so we really were the traditional all-American family. We'd have dinner together every night. We'd sit and on the weekends we'd spend weekends together around the swimming pool and barbecue. So a lot of fond memories, and really that kind of shaped a lot of the character that all of us brothers and sisters grew up with.
Sounds like it, for sure. So not a lot of Navy presence in Nebraska, though, that I'm aware of.
Yeah, off at Air Force Base. On the other side, we've got some Navy. And then, I grew up in, Buffalo, New York. We lived outside of Buffalo for a while. I ended up going to high school in Las Vegas, where there's a pretty significant Air Force population. But, the nearest ocean was the Pacific, and, hadn't seen that too many times. So Navy was definitely kind of a vision that came out of nowhere.
Absolutely. So I know you went to the Naval Academy. So I was going to say, where did the kind of love of the Navy and naval aviation come from that background? You mentioned moving around a lot. But.
Yeah. So all-American family, but a rebellious teenager. I really got the aviation bug when I was in high school. Had a neighbor who was a commanding officer of an F-15 squadron in the Air Force. Invited me out to work one day, showed me around. I thought, hey, this is the coolest thing in the world. I want to be like him. I want to make a living doing this. And had another neighbor who was a private pilot. He took me up one day. We flew out over Lake Mead, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And so in high school, I played basketball, and I was recruited by the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and some other small Division I schools. And, like any rebellious teenager does, Dad said, hey, it'd be great if you went to the Air Force Academy because that's closer. We could see you play. And after a recruiting trip to Annapolis, I said, thanks for your input, Dad. I'm headed to Annapolis, Maryland, where I can fly Navy jets.
Absolutely. Going to Maryland. Yeah, so, literally the other side of the country.
Yeah, exactly. They put me on an airplane and flew across by myself, found my way to Annapolis, and then, as they say, the rest is history.
For sure. That first day, though, because I'm thinking about that first day at the Naval Academy. You had, it sounds like really a little bit of exposure to folks in the military, but not really. You didn't come out of a military family or anything. Was it a bit of I guess, an eye-opening experience, I'm guessing?
Yeah, not even close to having a military background. And I can remember specifically, you get to the Naval Academy and everybody's nice to you while mom and dad are watching in the background. And as soon as you disappear into places where they're covert, you start getting yelled at. You get your hair cut off and shaved, and then, you learn how to march. And I can remember specifically saying, this is so hard. I'm never going to be able to figure it out. They're going to kick me out on the third day. And that never happened. But, it's hard. It was hard. I'm a guy who has a pretty good sense of humor, and I think my sense of humor was able to carry me through the summer.
Do you still keep in touch with any of the folks from that class?
Absolutely. We've got a strong class of 85. I was in first company, call sign Fun 1. That was our logo. So we had a great time together, and still, everybody, that's 4 long years of your life. So we all stay together really, really closely.
Absolutely. How does it work? I was an OCS guy, so I actually don't know how it works. How does it work at the Academy when you track select? So you're going to be an aviator, an NFO, SWO, all sorts, intel. How do you end up finding that field?
Yeah, so that happens during, at least when I was there, during the fall semester of your senior year, your first class year. And it goes down by class rank. And literally it's like the NFL draft that's going on right now. And, unfortunately, I wasn't a first-round draft. I was, down 700 something out of 1,000 people. So I watched really closely and really intently because I knew that I wanted to fly, and I only wanted to fly. And so, your number comes up and you go in groups of 25, and I think we went to a place called Smoke Hall, and you went up to Smoke Hall and you looked at the board, and hopefully there was an aviation slot, and you took your little key ring, and then away you went. And so you came back, you were happy, and you would just that really put the last 3.5 years of hard work in perspective, and kind of that first sense of satisfaction saying, hey, I've done it.
When you got down to Pensacola, was it what you expected going through? I guess it would have been API at the time?
Yeah, API at the time. And, when I got here, I was married, newly married, brought my wife down. So brand new experience for her. She came from a completely non-military family. So we got to know Pensacola. We loved it. We lived in a place called Michigan Avenue. We're afraid to drive by the apartment that we used to live in for obvious reasons. But, I went through, I did all my academics. It wasn't easy. It wasn't hard. We made it through. And we ended up going to Corpus Christi, Texas for our initial flight training.
Corpus Christi, yeah. T-34, I'm guessing?
T-34,
so was
back
that,
in the days.
Yeah, that wasn't your first flight ever in an airplane, but that was probably the first flight in a high-performance airplane.
Absolutely. So up to that point, like I said, I think my only other flight in an airplane had been in a Cessna that we went up with the neighbor. So, that whole experience, learning your procedures, going in and doing, cockpit procedure trainers and simulators, and then finally getting to the airplane for the first time. My first flight was actually in El Centro, California. We had done a winter detachment. So we went out there because the weather was much nicer. And I can still remember I was roommates in a Holiday Inn with my good friend Bill Tatomer. And, you'd just get this knot in your stomach, and you'd go out to the airplane for the very first time. You felt like you were going to get sick. And then, the smell of, aviation jet fuel and the burning and the heat of the cockpit. But, after your first couple flights, it just started to feel natural, and you loved it.
That's cool. So were you first flight on detachment out there? After that, I'm guessing came back home to Corpus. Did the rest of your training there?
We did. So you spent most of your time in a lot of El Centro during the winter. There's not a cloud in the sky. There's not a wisp of wind. So you go out there and you do all your basic flight training. You do your aerobatics. We did our formation flight. So I completed all that in a pretty small chunk of time. Came back to Corpus Christi, and when we came back, it was kind of a rude awakening because you had to land in a crosswind. You had to do things that we hadn't done up to that point. So in one respect, you were way ahead. You really felt proficient. But in another respect, you had to take 2 steps back and learn, how to land in, clouds and, crappy weather and the like, and especially the crosswind. So
of course, was it something that came natural, something that you felt you were prepared for, or just it was a lot going on all at once?
No. So I'll go back to my time at the Academy, and I've had to work really hard at everything I do. I wasn't a natural student. I played basketball for my first year and a half. My very first 4 weeks, the grades came out, and I had a whopping 1.67 grade point average. And I wish I could tell you that was out of a 2.0 scale, but it was not. And so, I worked real hard. I just, I didn't have the academic background, didn't have a lot of the advanced AP classes in high school. And so I got to a point where my academic counselor called me in one day and said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to fly Navy airplanes. And he said, then you probably need to hang your Chuck Taylors up and focus on classroom stuff and not basketball court stuff. So a lot of people get hurt at some point in their athletic careers and they're medically retired. I like to tell people that I was academically retired from basketball. So that's a long way of saying I just had to really work hard.
Sure.
Repetition was my friend, and the more I did something, the better I got at it.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. When you were going through, I'm guessing, well, now it's a little bit different, but you can go tailhook, maritime, obviously helicopters, and then I know E2C2, at least when I went through, that was one of the 4 options. What was it when you went through to select, and then how did that selection day, every squadron does it differently is the reason I asked, how did that go?
Yeah, it was kind of anticlimactic, and I look back, I've got a son who's a Romeo pilot right now, and he came in and they did made a big production out of it. They cut ties, they did all this other stuff, and I wasn't there, my wife was there for it, but he had a poker chip on his forehead, and it told him what he was going to fly. For us, the option really was you could go jets, helicopters, or big wing at the time, so generically clumped in. And I'm 6'5", and brand new married, and I thought, hey, this maritime thing doesn't sound bad. I'll take whatever I get. I wanted to fly jets. I would have flown helicopters. I just wanted to fly Navy aircraft. And so, our selection process, you put in your dream sheet like everybody else does. And I can remember it was like those movies you see where Rudy walks into Notre Dame and looks for his grades on the wall. And that's where I found out that I had selected maritime and P-3s.
Wow. Yeah, so different.
Not a big production.
No, not at all. But I mean, there's something to be said for, I guess, doing it either way. But it's a big day, but by the same token, needs the Navy. They're going to send you where they need you. That's a lot of it as well.
Yep. That was the first time I learned that lesson.
But you stayed in Corpus, I'm guessing, because that's where maritime, that's where the maritime pipeline begins.
Yep.
What was the airplane y'all trained in next?
So T-44s for multi-engine. So we went from the single-engine T-34 Mentor to the Super King Air. Learned how to fly, with 2 engines. Fairly big difference. A little bit larger aircraft, but really that was the foundation for everything I'd do for the next 34 years.
Gotcha. So that's primary, that's advanced. Any good, just before we move on from any good flying stories or memorable, I don't know, cross countries or anything fun during your time at Corpus?
I mean, I don't know if it was so much fun, but, when you're a student, you're used to doing everything. You do everything for yourself. And, our instructors would take us down to the Harlingen Valley, and we used to call it the Valley of the Downs because at the time it was only one of a couple places in the United States where they didn't have air traffic control radars. So everything was uncontrolled procedures. And so for a student pilot, you were scrambling, and you would shoot an approach, you'd have to talk on the radio, you'd get your missed approach procedures, you'd clean up, you'd fly away, and you'd be right back into the approach on the backside of a runway. And so, we were used to that. You do everything, and you've got this 180 pounds of, useless flesh and back who we called instructors. The very first time I did a cross country, we're flying across country, and this guy's in the right seat, and I'm in the left seat. And, they called our call sign, and it was Navy Gulf 123, turn right to this heading. And, I was getting ready to key my mic, and, my co-pilot comes on, and he talked on the radio, and I was like, oh, man. That was a sign of death. If your instructor talked on the radio on a normal instructional flight, you had failed. But, went on and, he actually was helpful. He was useful. And so, I look back on that, that's what right looks like. That's what the fleet looks like. And that was my first experience there. But for a while, I was a little nauseated that I wasn't quite cutting mustard.
Yeah. It's so funny how well you remember those initial folks you fly with. Here in the museum, in your museum, a couple weeks ago, we had a retirement for it was a retirement and change of command for our SAO over at VT-10. And when I was kind of looking around the back of the room, our new SAO CO used to be a VT-6 instructor. And I went to VT-6. And I looked in the back and thought, man, that couldn't be who I think it is. And if he's listening, he'll know who it is. It was my old on-wing from VT-6. And I remember, of course, a lot. And he remembers a lot about me, too.
Yeah.
But it shows kind of what a small world it is. And these people, you're going to see them again. But also, you remember the style. I try to think of that when I fly with, I say the kids, probably shouldn't say the kiddos. But when I fly with the kiddos, they remember probably a lot more of me than I remember of them. So I want to make sure it's a good impression and, they're actually learning because,
anyone can yell, anyone can be, that person. It doesn't help anyone in the big picture.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because we do remember. And so when I went through, we had surgrads. They were selective graduates that would go on, they would get their wings, and they would, recycle right in as instructors. So these guys were, typically Lieutenant JGs, O2s, and, you were an ensign. And, some of them would make you call them sir. It was a serious relationship. And, quite frankly, just my memory is most of these instructors were the screamers, the folks that you were like, hey, I don't want to be like that. Well, what goes around comes around, because I can remember, being in my first fleet squadron, and I'd been there for a year. I was almost fully qualified. And sure enough, guess who checks in? Joe Surgrad. Guess what? What goes around comes around, because he was flying with me as an instructor.
That's awesome. What a small world it is.
It is. Funny. Sometimes too small.
And I didn't know, that's actually something I'm glad you brought it up. I did not know that they had surgrads in the maritime community. I thought it was only a jet thing.
Yeah, no. We had, as a matter of fact, I've got a good friend who got his wings, and I think he was a surgrad in VT-10 at the time.
Wow, very cool. Well, I guess the lesson there, be a good person. Obviously, everyone should know that, hopefully. Be a good person, but then also, I like to tell folks, if you have a bad flight with someone, try to pick up what they did well. Hopefully they did something well and you learned something. And then know what they didn't do well. Terrible English. But don't do that. Don't emulate that. Be very cognizant of, hey, this is, hopefully you understand why it happened, what happened, but then why it happened, and you cannot do that to someone else. I guess is the way I like to.
As I went through, and I spent, I'll say thousands of hours instructing, and, one of the things I learned and one of the things I tried to teach was, there's a difference between a teacher or an instructor and an evaluator. And, I look back on a lot of those surgrads, and they really didn't understand what it meant to be a good teacher, to be a good instructor. And it's, understanding your student, understanding, how they connect, how they click, what makes sense to them, and, how to really teach them, not just evaluate them. That's easy. It's fixing the problems or fixing, the weaknesses or that terrible maneuver they had, taking them right back out there to give them confidence to be able to do it the next time and the next time.
Absolutely. There's a gentleman named Mike Ritland. He was a Navy SEAL, but he talks about look for the intelligence behind the mistake. And he's about dog training, so it's not exactly the same thing. But I try to think, okay, what did they see? What did they misperceive? What didn't I say in the brief? Frankly, I try to be pretty I don't necessarily tell them that, but I try to be pretty critical of myself. What didn't I do correctly? Because they're not trying to be messed up. Everyone has to learn, right? We all start at that same level. Maybe not the same level, but that basic level, I guess I should say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, after that, the mighty P-3. But how, again, I'm always interested in how everyone does selection. How did you, when you finished up in the T-44, how did you track select to the Orion?
So, again, that same type of selection, you go in, you see your name on a board. And, for me, I knew I was headed to Jacksonville to the P-3 Fleet Replacement Squadron. And within a week, we had, checked out of our Marriott officers' quarters, and we were headed to Jacksonville. And I got winged on October 31st, so Halloween. And, it was actually a pretty quick pipeline. It took me just over a year to go all the way through the pipeline. So, guys going through, when I, talk to, young men and women who are here at the museum, doing some temporary time, they've got 3 or 4 months that they're waiting just to get started. I had a pretty good ride of things, going through and, doing things quickly.
So you checked into the FRS as a JG. Or, I'm sorry, as an ensign.
As a matter of fact, I did. I checked in as an ensign, and I was promoted in the RAG as an ensign. And this is another one of those, I always thought it was going to be cooler than this. But I can remember, going into student control one day, they had called me and said, hey, I need you to sign this paper. And I said, what is it? And they said, well, this is your promotion to Lieutenant JG. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I was looking around. They said, what do you need? I was like, so what comes next? They're like, well, you can go in the restroom and pin those on yourself. So I can remember going into the men's head, looking in the mirror. I was in khakis, and I, promoted myself and marched on home and walked outside, and nobody knew the difference.
That is a fantastic story. That's awesome. And you're absolutely right. It took me 2 years to go through primary and advanced, and I winged on a Friday and promoted on a Monday, and then I was gone on like a Tuesday, I think.
Yeah.
So it is a very different flow at times. And I know something, probably in your last job in the Navy, that's something you definitely saw a little bit more of, but we'll hopefully get to that, the training pipeline and how people move through the system.
Yeah.
But I'm really actually curious to ask a couple of questions about that. But anyway, I want to get back to the P-3, Jacksonville. How'd you like Jacksonville? Was it a good place to to live?
Jacksonville is a place that if you go through my biography and my time in the Navy, we lived there several times. So I went through the FRS a few times. You have to go down to, get CNAL check rides, so Naval Air Atlantic check rides when you were the NATOPS officer. So we spent a lot of time. I think we ended up doing 3 full tours there. But it was one of those places where we never, we liked it. We had good friends, but it was never that place where you were like, this is going to be the forever home.
Sure.
So for us, it was, and that first time, again, you're still a student. So you're going through and, the pressure of learning, the pressure of performing. You want to do well on every flight. Every naval aviator that I've ever met is a Type A personality. So anything less than perfect doesn't sit well. So, we enjoyed our time there, but we were also excited, to go up to Brunswick, Maine, where we did our first tour in the Navy and just had a blast there with 3 full deployments. I showed up, got my wife, who was pregnant, moved into a house, and I flew away, met my squadron on our first deployment up in Keflavik, Iceland.
No way. What was it like flying out of Iceland? I know that obviously that was the mission set for the P-3, right? Looking out to the Russians on that side of the world. But
it was definitely work hard, play hard. We had a great squadron. I was in VP-23. The world famous Sea Chickens, and just had a great group of people. And again, you asked about my Naval Academy, compadres, and I would say I stay in as close or closer touch with a lot of the guys that I did my first tour. Just that common bond that you had. And so, being out of Keflavik, that's exactly what we did. So anti-submarine warfare. And, I joined the squadron in 1987. So it was the height of the Cold War. And, it seemed like every other week there was a Soviet, so back at the time the Soviet Union, a Soviet submarine that needed to be located. So we would fly our tails off, and it wasn't uncommon to land from one flight, get 12 hours minimum crew turnaround, and you were right back up in the air doing the same thing. So it was an incredible learning opportunity for a young guy who went one day could hardly spell ASW for anti-submarine warfare to, by the end of the deployment, really being an expert in the craft of warfighting and what we do. So it was great. The other thing, you worked hard, but we also played hard. So we had a squadron bar in our barracks that was called the Brass Nut. And if you've served more than 20 years in the Navy, you've probably heard of the Brass Nut. But, it was our own little bar. It was across the street from the Air Force. And every Friday, every duty crew would hold a themed party. And the best party I can remember was a Caddyshack themed party. And so at about 5:30 we rolled in after dinner, and we were all pleasantly surprised to find sod grass all over the floor, all over the bar, all over everywhere for the Caddyshack themed party. And we came to find out later that evening that some enterprising young junior officer had gone over to the Air Force one-star's yard, taken the sod from it and put it in there. So I'm not sure if that ever got replanted, but I'm sure that the Navy was on hack for a while.
Probably not. Yeah, that's awesome. What was it like flying against the Russians? I mean, I know nothing about that part of the world. I know nothing about that kind of flying other than the P-3, you're down low. Obviously a little bit different than the way the P-8 operates now. But from what you can speak about, what was it like? Because I'm assuming the weather is not the best in that part of the world either at all times.
Yeah, so you learned how to deal with pretty harsh weather. Whether it was on takeoff landing, a lot of snow, a lot of ice, and a lot of pretty significant crosswinds there in Keflavik itself. But really, we were flying out open ocean all the time, and a lot of the times we would fly at high altitudes because you wanted to be covert. So we did things, and you would drop your sonobuoy listening devices from thousands, tens and 20s of thousands of feet, and you'd be able to do your mission from there. So adds a little bit of complexity to the mission, but again, it was a neat opportunity. You always had your eye, because Keflavik was an island in the middle of nowhere. I think we had an on-top fuel requirement of about 18,000 pounds, because you always wanted to be able to go in, shoot a couple approaches in bad weather, and then divert to Scotland if you had to get away for an evening.
That's a long way to divert, though.
It's a long divert.
Yeah, you've got the gas for it, though.
It is.
And I'm told some of the loiter missions, y'all can actually shut a couple of the engines down. Is that still, an accepted practice? So that's the way that just basically burn less gas, you can be on station time, on station a little bit longer? Routinely.
So the P-3 was and is. We've got a couple squadrons, reserve squadrons, that are still flying them. But, routinely you'd shut down one of your 4 engines. You had plenty of, just based on gross weight, you had plenty of power to be able to save gas, to be able to stay on station longer. And not on that deployment, but on some subsequent deployments. If it wasn't uncommon if you were doing a search and rescue, and every ounce of gas mattered, that you could shut down 2 of your engines if you were light enough.
Wow. Okay, so as a non-P3 guy, I always like to ask, what's the story you would tell someone that knows nothing about the P3? I know a little bit about the P3 now, of course, but someone that knows nothing about the airplane, the mission set, just a flight from that first tour that you would say, this cements my time doing the mission, doing the real thing in that airplane. Do you have kind of a good story like that?
Yeah, I would say, and we still think about this. So I was fortunate to fly on the same crew. So, the 3 pilots were the same for a couple years. Our navigators and naval flight officers in back are sensor operators. And one mission took us outside of Rota, Spain. And so, all the Russian Soviet submarines at the time would travel through the Straits of Gibraltar to go from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. And I can remember a specific mission where it was, your proverbial, can't swear, so it was a black arse night, and
you can swear if you want to.
You couldn't see it. It adds a little value. So it was a black ass night, and you're you've got cliffs, sheer cliffs that are thousands of feet in the air, and we're down at 200 or 300 feet because it was night, 300 feet flying, and so you're intently listening to your sensor operators, give you signal steers and bearings to the submarine from where you are, but you're also listening intently to that radar operator who's saying flight 3 miles. 1.5 miles, 1 mile, flight, turn now. Otherwise, you're going to impact a cliff that you can't see. So, that was exciting. It was invigorating, but it really, was the epitome of crew cohesion and just that crew coordination that, really makes you look back on that first tour and say, this is what I want to do for a long time.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, you right into my next question, you mentioned that crew aspect of it. Was it something that folks struggled with, or was it something people could pretty easily, yep, we're all working together, there's not a front of the airplane, back of the airplane mentality, it's all of us on the same team, or is it something people take a little bit of time to kind of mature into?
I think you grow up, so it's the culture you grow up in. And so, if you grow up in Nebraska, you think about, raising cattle and corn. But, for us, this was part of the culture that you had kind of signed up for or had been signed up for. So it was fairly easy. And, the better crews were better coordinated, and people would work together. People would understand the nuances of, okay, you're sitting in back, what are you looking at? How can I help you better do your job? But it was a really enjoyable part of that. And I'll be honest with you, that was one of a couple reasons that, I decided when it was time to make that career decision, do I go to Delta Airlines or do I stay in the Navy? I really had fond memories of my crew, the relationships that we had built. And, I knew that I wouldn't have that same kind of thing with Delta Airlines.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So when you were back at home, you mentioned you left home immediately. When you were back home, you're at Brunswick, which is no longer, obviously, a Navy base. I did see her on the East Coast, so I passed through the area very, very briefly. But when you were back at home, what was it like living up in Maine?
Yeah, we liked it. I mean, we lived in a small town. We lived about 15 miles north of Brunswick in a place called South Gardner, including the Maine accent. We had neighbors who have lived on the same street for 35 years. We had actually all 3 of our children were, born there in the Brunswick Hospital. We had the same doctor, so really fond memories. Really, it was small town USA. The flying was great. You learned how to fly in, good weather and in bad weather. I can remember, in the wintertime you would walk out, and in Brunswick, the ramp would freeze over. And once it froze over, it was frozen for the winter. And I can remember taxiing out to the approach end, the departure end of the runway, and it'd take 45 minutes to do what would usually be a 5-minute taxi just because you're on snow and ice. And you get out there and, as you try to pivot your aircraft and turn in position for takeoff, all of a sudden you get a gust of wind and you're helpless because the airplane's just uncontrollably sliding. And that's when you say, okay, guys, we're going back in and we'll call it a night because this doesn't sound like too much fun.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I'm guessing we sunset the base just primarily because that mission set was no longer required. I'm guessing I'm jumping ahead a little bit in history here, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, we just didn't feel, the same demand for having a patrol plane base there in that part of the country. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, Brunswick.
I'm just guessing. I have
Brunswick
no idea.
got caught up in BRAC, so base realignment. And it was a money-saving initiative because, just because we closed Brunswick didn't mean the Russians or the Soviets, whoever is the foreign counterpart of the day. We still had a mission to do up there. So really, it was kind of a cost-saving initiative. And the community. When I started out, we had 24 active duty squadrons, and by the time I was a a wing commander, we were down to 14 squadrons. So you had started to diminish, and making everybody co-locate, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, made sense.
And you mentioned obviously taking commanded several things. Obviously commanded a P-3 squadron. But before we get there, I know you moved a little bit after that first fleet tour. Where'd you go next?
I was an odd guy. So if anybody out there is listening and saying, "What can I do for a good career?" Don't listen to anything that I say. You probably need to log off right now. But I went up and I did a PEP tour, so personnel exchange program. I went to Greenwood, Nova Scotia, and took my family up there. And my wife Amy and I used to joke that the Navy will never send us any place colder than Brunswick, Maine, but they did.
They did, yeah.
And so we spent just shy of 3 years up in Greenwood, Nova Scotia. Again, small base, small community. We lived in quarters. We had other exchange officers around us. Dear friends. As a matter of fact, one of the guys that I used to fly with, we would always go down to the coffee room, and we would call it the Pilots Union. So we would go down there and talk about flying at the airlines. And he was just down in Miami, so he was successful at making his transition to the airlines, and he flies for Air Canada. But he was down doing some training, and he flew up for the day, and we went out and had lunch. So again, incredible relationships, but also some different ways of flying that we really enjoyed.
And what airframe were they flying? Is it P-3 as well?
So it's a P-3 lookalike. It's called the CP-140 aircraft. So the Aurora is just a little different. The crew configuration is different. They sit on a rail in back, so everybody sits side by side. So it's a little different than the P-3 was, with different stations around the back. But they're aggressive. They are trained to fly instrument procedures. So I've never flown so many full procedure turn approaches in my life. And you could get to a point where you can recite how much clearance you have on a specific procedure turn approach, how you needed to time, how you did this. And the cool thing about the Canadians is, in the United States, we were restricted to fly at 200 feet above the water in the day. The Canadians, we got down to 100 feet above the water. So when you want to get close and personal with Mother Nature, take your P-3 or your Aurora down to 100 feet above the water.
What's the wingspan of that airplane?
Just about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That is low. Holy moly. Okay. I know it's probably reaching back a little bit, but what is something the Canadians did really well that maybe we didn't do? That's even a poor way to ask it. What's something that... Pump the brakes. I'm trying to find out something maybe unique to the way they flew the airplane compared to the way the U.S. Navy flew the airplane. Does that kind of make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. So big difference. When I grew up in my first squadron, and I would say that our fleet replacement squadron at the same time was, we had this mindset where I need to know everything about this widget. What does the Fetzer valve do? What PSI does this light come on? You know what? I can't fix that. And the Canadians had a much more practical approach, or a different approach. And it was all about, they fly up in the north, the far north. And it was all about, I need to be the best instrument approach pilot that I can possibly be. I need to fly instrument approaches down to, a gnat's tail, so that I can get in on a bad day, or I can fly into some place. And while I was there were several mishaps. There was a C-130, that had a cold weather and bad weather mishap way up north. And so they really do live and breathe based on their ability to fly instrument approaches and instrument procedures.
Of course. It's that makes perfect sense. After the PEP tour, which sounds like an awesome deal, where'd you go next? Yeah,
then it was payback time. That tour really made me realize how much. And so the structure when I was in Canada was much different. So, you were in the fly phase. So you would go out and you would have online students, and you'd instruct in the classroom. Then you'd take that into the airplane for both a kind of basic fly phase and then a tactics phase. And then you went over to the simulator section, where that got some downtime. So you could study up for your next class. You do proficiency flights. And the one thing I really missed was I had lots of time off, and I had more flight time than I knew what to do with, which is unusual for a pilot to say. But I missed a couple things. And the first thing was that crew, flying with the same crew every day, and the familiarity and just, the brotherhood of, being able to fly with people, because at that point it was just males. But then, we also missed the squadron, being in a squadron, a wardroom, being able to be a division officer, because, as good or bad as this was, I didn't have a collateral duty. I was just a pilot, went out and flew things, did simulators. Eventually I was a standardization pilot there. But, you didn't have that ground job where you could connect with your enlisted troops and make a difference. And that's something that, both my wife and I really fell in love with was that concept of service, whether it was helping the squadron out, helping, young sailors. And so, we made the decision at the time. And, the fact, if you go back and look at your history books, all the airlines started to, kind of flounder for a while. So, it was an economically based decision, and we decided we'd, stay in the Navy and go to the ship, and went to San Diego, where I was on board the USS Kitty Hawk for 2 years as a flight deck officer.
Oh, wow. A lot of lessons learned on the flight deck of that ship, I'm sure.
No doubt about it. And so on the one extreme, I said, man, I love being a division officer. What I didn't realize was as a V1, which is the flight deck officer, or V2, which is catapults and resting gear, you had people who played even harder and worked even harder than I ever thought about. And, with playing hard also came captain's mast every Monday on the bridge. So, it was a great leadership laboratory. You had folks from all around the country that did all kinds of things that had, different social backgrounds, had different values. So, for a young lieutenant, I had almost 230 people that worked for me as, a young guy. So it was an incredible learning opportunity. And there's nothing like, so Kitty Hawk was one of the last conventional, so no bubble. I was a real shooter. We got to stand up in the weather, whether that was good or bad, and, be up there with the troops.
Yeah, that's so very, very cool. A really unique experience because, I don't even know, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know where Kitty Hawk is now, but not obviously in the fleet.
In a scrapyard somewhere. They were towing her around the corner, I think, a while ago.
Gosh, I thought I'd seen that, but I didn't want to say it. Okay. From there, where'd you go next, sir?
So from there, all the career advice I had, and again, never listen to me, somebody said, hey, we'll send you to the War College. I said, I really don't want to do that. Can I go fly? And so I got to go back as a pre-department head at our FRS. So I had done kind of the equivalent of the Canadian Fleet Replacement Squadron, and now I was going back to VP-30, which was our replacement squadron. Got to stay there, relearn the airplane. Again, every nut and bolt, every nook and cranny. And I was a young lieutenant commander at the time. So my instructors were all lieutenants, and guess what? They didn't take any mercy on me. So it was, you learn humility, you learn how to, anybody can teach you anything. And I think that's a place where I really learned what it was, what it was like to be a good instructor, what made a good instructor, what allowed you, or which forced you after a flight to come back and say, hey, what did I do good on that flight? How did I teach well? What am I proud of? What do I need to work on? How can I do things better in the future? And again, lots of hours in the landing pattern, lots of hours with students, and just a love of teaching people.
For sure. And it's so different from the way we fly the helicopters, and obviously two different machines. But I'm from Tennessee, and I'd be in East Tennessee. I'm born in Knoxville. You'd see a P-3 or now a P-8 come up and bounce, and I would look up the tail code, and it's a Jack's bird, and just come up several hundred miles, a long way just to bounce somewhere away, as opposed to the helicopter we'd go 15, 20, 50, who knows, but just such a different mindset, such a different machine, so much bigger, and you can go a ways too.
It's a good problem to have.
I can imagine it is. Lots of fuel. Okay, after that. There's so much to talk through, so I want to make sure I hit on all of it.
So, Jacksonville, and then I ended up going to Hawaii. So, supposed to go to do my department head tour, and, first choice was go back up to Brunswick. Well, the squadron that I was slated to was decommissioning. So, came in with my executive officer, who was kind of the orders negotiator, and said, well, okay, what's your second choice? And at the time, it was Brunswick, Maine, Jacksonville, Florida, Whidbey Island, or Hawaii. And I said, okay, well, my next choice, we own a house here in Jacksonville. So that makes sense. Save the Navy some money. We stay in our house. And he kind of looked at me and gave me the XO frumpy face and said, I think we're overcrowded here, so that's not going to work out. What's your next choice? I said, okay, well, I darn sure don't want to move to Hawaii because we got a dog, the kids, the schools, I don't know about this. And I said, let's go to Whidbey Island because that's still, in the States. I'm the outdoors guy. And he interrupted me. He's like, no, that's not a good choice either. I'm like, okay, so you're giving me four choices and one answer is right, and you're pretty much telling me I'm going to Hawaii. He goes, yeah, let me look into that. I think we can make it happen. But, everything works out for a reason. We went over there, and we just had a phenomenal 2 years. First started flying out of Barbers Point, Hawaii, did a couple deployments, and after our last deployment, we moved over to Kaneohe Bay. So, got to see a lot of the islands, some incredible flying. People go on vacation and pay money to go over there. So we got to live over there for a couple of years and really enjoy it.
That's wonderful. Sounds like a good time. Okay, after that, so that's the department head tour, right?
Department head tour.
Okay.
And after that, somebody said, "Hey, what do you want to do next?" And, okay, this is a trick question. I know this. I said, well, I'd love to go back and fly P-3s again and teach it. We didn't have a weapons school at the time. It was a weapons tactics unit. And I said, I'd love to go back there and do that, because I love to teach. I love to, do things. And now really more of a tactics focus on, what we can bring back. And so, I got the advice, that's a terrible idea. No, you can't do that. And 2 months later, I was in Jacksonville, Florida. We moved into our second home that we own down there. And, I got an opportunity to, again, not only to teach in the schoolhouse, but also to go out to each of the fleet squadrons and be involved in some of their training as well. So, terrible career move, as everybody tells me, but seemed to work out.
I think it worked out.
At the end of 35 years, I don't have any regrets.
That's really neat. When you got to go out and fly with those different squadrons, something that I don't think a lot of folks, there may be civilians that don't necessarily understand the military aviation especially, standardization is so key. And you're the person holding those standards across the fleet. Was that a tough thing that each squadron kind of wanted to say, hey, we want to do it our way? Or were people very accepting and realizing that, hey, it is good that we have someone who's going to even things out and make sure that a pilot from each squadron can, supplement another squadron if they needed to.
Yeah.
We're all doing things the same way.
Yeah. Well, so the good thing is, again, this is a culture that we're, as naval aviators, doesn't matter what your type model series is, we're brought in a culture of standardization. And, within the, black and white left limits, there are variations, there are techniques that you can do. And I would say I learned as much. And it wasn't about saying you're doing it right or wrong. You're saying, hey, you're kind of on the far right side of this. Here's some things to think about as you employ this. So it was really, you were teaching more techniques than anything else because the standardization purpose was really there when you got there. And so I would learn things, hey, I never thought about it that way, and I like that technique. It doesn't violate a procedure, doesn't violate a rule, doesn't violate a policy. So being able to, take back things that you can bring to other squadrons. And it was interesting to see, how different they did things in Jacksonville as opposed to Brunswick, as opposed to Whidbey Island, as opposed to Hawaii. So, it was a learning opportunity for me as well.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot of people talk about, East Coast, West Coast Navy or naval aviation. I'm from a community with 3 squadrons, an FRS and 2 fleet squadrons, and they're within eye line. We can see one another across the seawall.
Very familiar.
And even then, there's a tremendous difference between the squadrons. Yeah. So that's the reason I ask, because I'm always curious how each kind of community manages that. And then obviously, it's always a shifting target, I guess, in some cases, but you want it to be the same because... Yeah, it just matters so darn much. I can't. I'm trying to find the words to say how much it matters in aviation, but you have to do things the right way, number one, the safe way, and the same way. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and if you look back in history, I mean, naval aviation has this, mishap curve that we show all the time, and it starts off, back in the early days of naval aviation with some really high numbers. And fortunately, we were a learning culture. We would learn from each one of those mishaps. You would apply the procedures. You would tighten standardization. I think that's why we look. Even any loss of an aircraft or loss of a person is one too many. But you can look at kind of that relative success rate and point back to standardization and how we do things.
Absolutely. Okay. After that, where are you going next?
All right. So I screened for command. So I was selected to command my first squadron as a commander and went out to Whidbey Island, Washington. And, again, timing worked out. Loved Whidbey Island, but, was able to do a couple deployments. So I got a lot to see a lot of the West Coast that I hadn't seen before. And, again, just, loved being in an environment. I was very fortunate as the number 2 guy, the executive officer. So I got to do that for a year, learn the squadron, meet the people, understand, what made people tick, who was strong, who needed a little more help. And then I fleeted up after a year and became the commanding officer. So, again, you walk into a scenario like that, and it's like you adopt a big family, a multi-generational family, and you get to know those people. And within 2 years, I mean, there are still, people that I look back to, and, it's really meaningful and powerful. And, that was a tour where, you really realized, hey, this isn't about me. It's not about a number on a fitness report. It's not about, recommendations I get out of the job. This is about the impact you make on other people. And that was really, really cool and empowering for us.
I'm sure. And I'm always curious to speak with folks that are skippers. Highest high, lowest low. What would you say in that job? It's like you said, 3 years in total, year and a half as XO. You fleet up to BCO after that. But it runs the gamut. One of my old skippers, when she'd come into the wardroom at times, I remember as a JO, all I was thinking about is going flying, right? That's what you're supposed to, your ground job. And she would come in and talk about this or that, and I kind of opened my eyes at times. I'm really glad she did it. And she's actually CEO of our FRS right now, a wonderful person. But it opened my eyes how much more she sees as a skipper that I would never even realize in my wildest dreams that she had to keep, in check for a large aviation squadron. Yeah. Any kind of goalposts on either side there?
Yeah, so just a couple sea stories. And again, as a commanding officer, you're responsible for everything. And it's the good stuff. It's, the homecomings, the, standing up and addressing the crew after you get back from a long, successful deployment. But, you always have to hold people accountable as well. And so, one of the hardest things was, being able to bring somebody in who'd made a mistake and hold them accountable, realizing that, they've got little kids at home and, you're really holding the keys to say, I can reduce you in rank, I can take money from your paycheck for the next couple months. And, but then, taking that same experience when you hold somebody accountable to say, hey, this is one time. Okay, it's not a career failure. It's not not an end of the road. Really, this is up to you to make the best out of it, and then to work with them. And I would always follow that up. A week after doing a captain's mast or doing something that just doesn't feel good to anybody, but bring them back in and say, hey, I'm hearing great things about you. I've been talking to your chief and trying to get them pumped back up to make it a one-time thing so they can march on and do good things. You ask about, I guess this is another low story, but it's kind of funny because the guy who did it is a retired 4-star admiral. We were out in 5th Fleet, and we had just done a full night. And I used to fly a lot. I was a guy who said, hey, if you're leading the squadron, you should be leading from the cockpit. And so I wasn't shy to put myself on a flight schedule. And I loved it. I'm not so sure how much the JOs loved flying with me, but they did enjoy it. And we talked about a lot of different things, and it was, more of a teaching opportunity for me. Well, this one night we were up in Afghanistan, and whenever we'd fly in Afghanistan, you're flying high, just to stay out of missile engagement ranges and zones. And, we do that flight all night long. And we're coming back, and the crew's exhausted, and we get a radio message that there's a ship that was in distress about 2.5 hours south of where we were. So we said, okay, we've got gas, we'll go render assistance. We went down there, and I can remember, we couldn't even have people stand up in the aircraft. They wanted us to take pictures, do all these things, render whatever assistance we could. And so we did that. The ship, you could actually see people on the stern of the ship getting ready to jump into the water. They were looking for the nearest ship. So we're talking people in, we're doing all this kind of stuff. And, we get these weird messages. Hey, make sure you take high quality video. Make sure you take high quality video of this search and rescue. And so, we got to a point, and you could not physically stand up because the weather was so bad. So, we're down at 300 feet just getting pummeled. And, I made the decision as, the mission commander, hey, let's sit down, we'll get some still pictures, and, folks will be happy. We'll be, we'll have done our job, and we'll sleep well tonight. So we go back in, and the first thing that happens is this captain comes off and meets us and says, did you get high quality video? And I'm like, well, we got some pictures, and we got some things, that really show the scenario. And, all of a sudden you could see him start to get these little beads of sweat on his forehead. He goes, oh, he's not going to be happy. Well, it ends up that retired 4-star Admiral Harry Harris was, I think he was the mock director, the OPSO there at 5th Fleet. And he had a specific reason that he wanted that high quality video. And when he found out that the crew hadn't brought back the video, he said, I want that PPC fired. And so I guess there was a period, and I'm good friends with Admiral Harris, who went on to be ambassador to South Korea. I joke with him on occasion and say that you fired me, but I think you rehired me when you found out that, hey, I'm going to need a squadron CO. So I learned to live another day.
That's awesome. Looking back, J.G. Cozad, when you checked in as a pilot, you probably met the skipper. I'm guessing one of your first flights probably with the skipper. Looking back at it as a CO, what would you tell yourself as that brand new check-in? Because I think, again, with the benefit of time and experience, there's a lot that you see that as a new check-in, as a new guy, you have no idea, you have no way of knowing. Any lessons learned that you can kind of think of that, man, I'm really glad, I wish I'd known this, but I'm glad I learned it. It just took time to learn it.
Yeah. So I had a guy that I worked for, and he told me, he said, here's kind of the rules of how to be successful. And at that time, when you're a JG, when you're brand new to a squadron, you don't want to be successful. You want to survive. I want to make it through every flight. I don't want to get it down. I don't want to do this. But he said, your number one job right now is to be the best pilot you can be. So learn the aircraft, fly the aircraft, look for every opportunity. Be the guy who's in the schedules office saying, when can I fly next? When can I fly next? And always be ahead, be ready. And so I did that. But he also said, but as you're doing that, don't disregard the squadron, because there are some people that'll, put themselves in a stateroom or in a wardroom, and they'll just kind of become hermits. He said, get out there, get involved in the squadron, and get involved as a division officer. And quite frankly, those were the things that I enjoyed doing. I like to interact with, my enlisted troops. I like to get to know them. I wasn't the branch officer who was in, the PR AME shop for 45, hours a day. I was down there. I knew what was going on, but, I loved doing all those things. And so, the same advice that I got was the same advice I gave as a CO, and certainly as a wing commander.
Awesome. Okay, moving on from there. I don't know, I think that's got to be the high point, but you have so many more high points after that. After Squadron Command, where'd you go next?
So we went to Millington, Tennessee, and I became, so really, if you think about it, that was my first staff tour. So I had just graduated from command and moved on. I thought it was a neat way. So as a detailer, so you're doing community management, you're doing, writing orders for people. I thought it was a neat way to stay in touch with the community. And so went there for 2 years, started off as a commander detailer, and then ended up moving up as the captain detailer as a young commander. So if you want to talk about uncomfortable moments, it's when you have to call that, you're just a commander, and you have to call that CAG and say, sorry, CAG, you didn't get that job, or sorry, I know you want to do that, but we can't do that for you. So having some of those uncomfortable conversations, and it's funny, years later, I'll meet somebody and they'll say, Cozad, I recognize your name from somewhere. And I always fall back on, I have a brother that was in the Navy as well, so maybe it's him.
I was going to say, that name is probably a pretty unique one. So.
It is.
What do they train you for that? Do they prepare you for that? Or is it just something, OJT, that Navy tradition you learn on the job? I'm going to have to deliver some bad news, and this is the person I got to call right now.
Yeah, it's all OJT. And, it's you can't, our motto was you can't say yes to everybody, but it's all about how you say no to somebody. It
should be a bumper sticker, I guess.
You get, write it down. But, you have to be sympathetic, empathetic, and
sure.
You got to understand, because guess what? I was that guy on the other end of the phone, and I can remember this when I was in Canada. I had told everybody that I wanted to go to San Diego, California, and I wanted to be a catapult and resting gear officer. And I got this is available. And after, 3 calls with my detailer, I vividly remember him saying, hey, buddy, beggars can't be choosers. And I was like, oh, okay, you probably could have delivered that in a little more subtle manner. But, that sticks with you. And so it's all about how you work with people, how you raise friends. And you can't always say yes, but it's about how you say no.
Yeah, and I'm not a detailer. I know several folks that have done the job. I would guess that you're probably having to look out for the entire naval enterprise, naval aviation in general.
Yeah.
It's not looking out for you. You're looking out for a broader thing. But that means that you're going to have to tell some people what they want to hear and tell some people probably bad news, places they don't want to go or jobs they don't want to have necessarily.
Yep, absolutely. And I've never gotten my first choice. Never, ever gotten my first choice. But I've been happy everywhere I've gone. And so, just trying to think of the bigger picture and, hey, what can I do? How can I tribute? How can I have fun here?
Yep. So out of Millington, where do you go next?
So I selected for Major Command, so Wing Command, and said, boy, we loved Whidbey Island. So guess where they didn't send me? Whidbey Island.
Whidbey Island.
A number 2 choice. So I went back to Jacksonville, and again, we were very familiar, very comfortable, but, again, had a great time. And my focus there was, I kind of set some goals for myself. I love to fly. And I said, I'm going to go out, and I'm not just going to be a passenger. I want to go out and I want to instruct once a week. I want to fly the different squadrons and, kind of share some of what I know, but that also stay in touch with kind of trends. And within about 3 months of my being there, the P-3 first started started flying in about 1960, early 60s. So we've flown the wings off of those things literally, and we, there was a red stripe bulletin which, from Naval Systems Command said, hey, we need to ground these airplanes until we can do some wing inspections and then some wing improvements. So my entire tour, almost 2 years as a wing commander, I got to travel around. I would visit the deployed squadrons, but I really didn't get to fly. I probably had 20 flight hours. And so all my flight time was in the simulator. I'd bring my son in. He was in high school at the time, and that was kind of the carrot. You finish your homework, you go to basketball practice, you come home, and we'll go get 30 minutes in the simulator. And so we did that. And at the end of the tour, and I'll call him out by name, but you always do your final flight. I'm like, hey guys, I haven't flown in, it's probably been 16 months since I was at the controls. I said, so they said, what do you want to do? I said, let's just go shoot some approaches. And so we jump in, and there's a, young lieutenant who is on top of his game, man. He is a squadron ATOPS officer. He is, cocky like all nobody's business. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, Orca, and that's his call sign. And I said, I'll tell you what, Orca, we're going to do some old school flying here. I said, I'm going to land. You're going to land. I'm going to land. You're going to land. And our flight engineer in the middle seat between us is going to be the judge. And he's going to say whose landing was better than the last. And he said, you're on, sir. What do you want to put on it? I said, well, it's a beer per landing. So we came down, and after 5 landings, I had to look at the engineer and squeeze him on his knee. And I say, hey, do me a favor. Let him have the last one. I don't care. and so I walked away, for the record, I was 6 for 6, but I gave him the final one just so he wouldn't commit suicide that night.
That's
but
funny.
It was good. But again, to show folks that hey, our trade, our craft is flying aircraft. Being at the top of our game, and it was kind of refreshing to see that even after that much time, just flying a crummy old simulator, that I was able to go in there and show the young pups what it took.
That makes perfect sense. And Burrow probably had a pretty good foundation all those hours before. That probably helped just a little bit.
Yeah.
Or it must be just a really accurate sim. I don't know.
I don't know.
One or the other.
It wasn't number 2.
Yeah, that's probably a fair statement. Okay, after that, where'd you go, sir?
So now I got to think. So I went from that tour and hadn't gotten any college education, post college education. So I went up to D.C.
Okay.
And went through the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, now the Eisenhower School. Spent a year there. Didn't wear a uniform very much, and I was one of those guys who hadn't been in a classroom other than an engine classroom or an aerodynamics classroom or a hydraulics classroom in many, many, many years. So on the very first day, they brought in one of the lead dean of academics and said, okay, who hasn't written an academic paper in 5 years? In 10 years, keep your arms up, in 15 years. And there was one old gray-haired guy from the Department of State and I who had our hands up at 22 years, and they said, okay, that's about all we need. You probably want to check in with your academic advisor before you start here. And, I thought, oh, that's really funny. And, of course, on my very first paper, I'm doing research, and I'm like, hey, this is really cool, this thing called Wikipedia. And I cited Wikipedia, and I got this, red frowny face on my first academic paper, and my instructor said, never ever use that as a reference again. And I said, okay. But what he didn't tell me was, you can't cite Wikipedia, but you can go in there and find subsources. And so that's what I used to do. And I graduated with honors. So
It worked out.
It worked out.
Did you stay in D.C. after that?
We did. So it was kind of unusual. I had finished up there, and they threw my name in the hat for a couple packages, and I got a call one day from the detailer, and I've been literally sitting at home because we had graduated, still didn't have a job. They were waiting for nominations in D.C., and he said, hey, we'd like to put you in for kind of an unusual job at the White House. And I'm like, okay. And what is it? He said, well, it's in the White House Situation Room. So, that turned into a 3-month-long process. I did my first interview, waited, canceled vacation, did a second interview, and finally did a third interview with General Jones, who was the National Security Advisor at the time. Went in there, and, I was nervous. My predecessor had told me, hey, if General Jones asks about secure comms, tell him you're the expert. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm a pilot. I know how to, green means secure, yellow means non-secure, and maybe I got that backwards now. But I said, I'm not. He goes, just trust me on this. So I went upstairs, met him. He came out, nicest gentleman in the world. And, he said, well, it's really nice to meet you. Do you have any questions for me? And I said, yeah, that's kind of awkward, but yes, sir. When are you planning on making a selection? And he said, well, you're sitting here in my office, so I've made that selection. So what other questions do you have? I said, nothing else. When do you want me to start? So I got to start, and, I literally worked in the West Wing of the White House for 2 years, and what an incredible experience is, just I'll say a Navy captain, working in Atlanta Giants.
So for those that don't, obviously we've seen it on TV, but the Situation Room, it's probably a very misunderstood place. For those that don't know anything about it, like me, what would you say? What would you kind of give a 10-second elevator, maybe not 10-second, but a brief description, because I feel like I've seen it literally on television, and television is not a documentary. It's usually a little bit fictional. Television
usually shows you one aspect, and that's the conference room or rooms. If you think back to the famous President Obama picture where he's sitting in the small conference room, we had 3 conference rooms, and that's where you would hold all your national security staff, high-level, highly classified briefings with, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, everybody coming in, all your interagency partners. But there's also a communications component, so all your high-level head of state communications and information would come through, and then we also had a watch floor. So 6 really, really talented, young folks, so typically 25 to 35 years old from each of the different intelligence agencies, so CIA, NGA, all the different alphabet soups. And then also we had folks from each of the services, intelligence officers that would come in. So you were responsible for, making sure the trains run on pretty high-level missions, but also kind of taking the information and, taking it from different watch centers, so from the Pentagon, from the CIA, taking all that information, kludging it into a coherent story, and making a decision on, hey, what policymakers, what decision makers in the White House need to have this information now.
Sure. Is it's not a 9-to-5 job, I'm assuming. You're pretty much always on call, or is it you work a certain shift, or how does that type of work go?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was the best job I've ever had because, when I came into work, everybody used to say, oh, DC traffic is terrible. Well, I'd come into work at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and there was no traffic. I'd go to the gym at 9 o'clock, and when I'd drive home at 9:30 or 10, there was no traffic.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And I always called my wife, as I was rounding one corner, and I say, hey, sweetie, I'll be home in half an hour. Guess where I am? She'd say, where? I said, well, I'm smiling. I'm driving by the Pentagon, and I don't have to stop. So it was great. It was long hours, lots of incredible, experiences, in the Oval Office doing head of state calls, traveling as the national security rep on Air Force One, kind of seeing the big logistics behind a presidential trip when, the president would go to New York City. So, just a once in a lifetime experience. But, at the end of the day, on my very last day, we called him the Blue Badge because the Blue Badge got you access into, the White House, the residence, anywhere, you wanted to go unescorted. It was always, nice to be able to turn that in and say, okay, no more, no more pressure. The pressure's off me. I'll probably never go back in that place, but, it was an incredible place to work for 2 years. Sure.
But as I recall, looking at the old resume, those 2 years included a pretty specific day in 2011. Were you there that day?
Yeah. So, actually, the day itself is cool, and I think you're talking about the day Osama bin Laden was killed.
I think we just came up on the anniversary 11 years a couple days ago.
We did. The really cool thing was kind of the behind the scenes and how that all generated itself. And, this is all unclassified, but, it was a series of high-level meetings, and you can read books, that kind of describe it. Admiral McCraven has one. There's, one called 12 o'clock midnight, I think, that kind of talks about, the killing of bin Laden, but it's the planning and the preparation that led up to that. And I can remember the very first time, being asked to help some intelligence professionals they had a model that they were bringing in. So had to work with Secret Service, had to bring it into the room. And, we did a lot of things to make sure the room was as secret and enclosed as it could be. And so, they said, hey, where do you want to put this? I said, well, I'm not sure what it is, but let's put it on the far end of the table. They opened it up, and it was, it looked like a large scale model that you'd see in a train, a scale train model. And it was a little compound. And after, putting pieces of the puzzle together. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it was, but that was the Abbottabad compound where bin Laden was killed. And, a series of those meetings and, not necessarily being in the room for each one of those, but, being able to sit through and watch the deliberations and understand, what a painstaking process that was. It was a really neat day when you saw that come to fruition with, communications from the White House Situation Room to downrange, to be able to say, hey, this all happened. And, to hear the code word that McRaven passed that indicated, hey, we got him.
So I'm guessing you weren't in the photograph, the famous one that you referenced earlier, but you were in the room. I mean, you were managing the room. This probably was, I'm guessing, one of the bigger days that you were on duty.
Yeah, I was in the far background, and that's why I have my face blurred out right now, so you can't see that. But yeah, and it was a really, it was a neat success story, and it was really quiet. A lot of our watchstanders didn't really realize what was going on or what was happening until after the event, and we started making phone calls. But you look back and you say, how that was enabled, how the mechanism works. And, we were at the White House and you were purely, non-party affiliated. You weren't a Democrat. You weren't a Republican. You were on a military assignment to do a specific, function. And at the time I was the director of operations, and just, being able to know that your team, did everything that they needed to do on a historic mission like that. And then, seeing people as, folks walked outside the White House that evening, jumping and being as ecstatic and, celebrating, a pretty profound military mission is pretty cool.
I was a college student. I was getting ready for final exams. And I remember that Sunday night, because we were studying, my brother and I were in our dorm room. We lived together for a couple of years in college. And I remember seeing a special news bulletin, all this stuff, and thinking, man, I wonder if that's what it is. And it was a very proud moment, I think, for the whole country. But again, I'm sure it was a very proud moment for you, because like you said, it was your staff, it was your people that enabled not just that night, but the lead up to that night. So that had to have been a very proud moment for you.
Yeah, it was. And, by no means do I take credit. Did my watch team take credit? We had a motto. And if you think about it, the president was a routine visitor, the vice president, national security advisor, Secretary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, Leon Panetta when he was SecDef. When all these people would come in, we would remind each other, and this was part of my interview process, there are a lot of important people in the West Wing. We're not one of them. So we would just pitch in, roll up our sleeves. None of us wore military uniforms. If we were from the military, you just kind of blended into the woodwork and you did your job.
I did not realize that. I thought, especially at least in your job, I thought you would be in uniform, but I didn't realize.
Not at all. The only folks who wear uniforms are the military aides, and so they're readily identifiable by the president. I've got one picture back there on my wall where President Obama, my son, and I, and this is kind of another funny picture, and my wife are in the Oval Office for my farewell. And typically you'll go up there and it's a production line. You'll get 2 or 3 minutes of snap with the boss, and then you're gone. And we were in there. We were the last ones, but just based on my boss, and he looked at me and said, I didn't even realize you were in the military. And so, it was a well-kept secret from the president. But the funny thing is, if you look at that picture, I'm wearing summer white, so short-sleeve uniform. And one of our military aides, a great young lady who was a surface warfare officer, she contacted me and said, hey, I'm going to be up there for your ceremony. Just want to make sure you're going to be in service dress blues, because, the protocol is, it's dress uniforms every place in the White House. Well, I had just done a PCS move, and I had stuck everything in. The only thing I had was summer white. She said, you're kidding me. I said, no, ma'am, I am not kidding you. I said, the only thing I have, I could be in a suit or summer white. She goes, okay. She said, I am going to catch holy heck for this, but I'm going to wear summer whites to match you. And sure enough, I think she took a little heat from the other military aides, but I'm not sure how many other naval officers have pictures with the President of the United States in summer whites in the Oval Office.
That's fantastic. Well, you might be the only one. So.
I don't know. I am unique. I have some unique stories.
That's awesome. Again, looking back, I'm guessing probably we talked about OJT, on-the-job training. You were trained for that job by your successor, and then you trained your relief.
Exactly.
Broad strokes. You mentioned, you're not the mission. You guys are there to enable others. I don't want to speak for you, but what are kind of lessons you passed on? I don't know anything specific, but again, leadership is so different in all these roles. It has to be one of the most unique roles a military officer serves in. any lessons that you passed on to your relief in terms of, hey, these are things you need to do for success. Remember, it's not about you. It's probably about others.
Yeah. So two things really come to mind. Number one, it's all about training. And so we would be away in the middle of the night. And, when I was a squadron CO, if something happens in the squadron, and I think this is pretty common, you call the XO, you call the CO, I want to know about it so I can inform my boss. We didn't have time to do that. And so the training that we had with a senior watch officer on the floor, he had all the autonomy. He had all the, the authority to be able to pick up the phone and make it a really high-level call, typically to a national security advisor before you went to the president. But, typically we would find out about those events hours after they happened, because you had, you had a great training program. Your folks knew what, in military terms, commander's intent was, and we were able to walk through those. So, it was, constant training to be able to make sure you were at that level. But it's also, I talk about this a lot. There's no such thing as a zero defect environment until you work at the White House. And that is the place. And you can't afford to make mistakes. You can't afford to be inaccurate. You can't afford to get the story right. And so inevitably, you're going to make mistakes. Somebody's going to do something that doesn't make somebody else happy. And so I think it's the calm, steady leadership as opposed to flying off the handle and berating people in public. That was the other piece that I really imparted on him is, there's so much pressure here just by nature of where you work. You really have to be that calm, steady leader.
Awesome. I love it. I feel the same way. That's so cool. Okay, after that, it's got to be a huge highlight, but where did the Navy send you next after that?
Yeah, so I went up to Newport, Rhode Island, and I was selected to be one of 10 senior fellows on basically a think tank, and at the time it's been disbanded since then. For the record, it wasn't because of our group, but went up on the CNO's Strategic Studies Group, and we were basically given a one-year project, and you said, hey, this is a really hard issue, and ours, the generic title was Maintaining Undersea Dominance. And so we had a whole year to, it was kind of like a PhD level project where you could travel, you could set up interviews, you could talk to people, you could look at different business models and come up with, really recommendations for the Chief of Naval Operations and all his senior flag officers. And so we were able to spend that time in Newport, do a lot of neat traveling, get a lot of behind the scenes looks at things that were uncommon, different, learned about the power of storytelling when we were there, as opposed to, doing a PowerPoint brief and giving a Navy brief. And so being able to convince people that, hey, this is why it's important and this is what you need to know. So it was a really enjoyable year. I got to learn and I got to meet some phenomenal people that were there from all the services.
I have so many questions about that project, and I'm guessing you probably can't talk about any of them only because I feel like that is probably the more tightly controlled world undersea warfare that we as the Navy operate in. Is that a pretty fair statement?
It is. So everything we did was, our final report was at the unclassified level. So you'll see, I've seen a couple articles recently about large diameter underwater vehicles, and the Navy's thinking about doing away with them. So they're autonomous vehicles that, go around and do things, surveillance similar to what other things do.
Yeah.
So that was one of our concepts that we generated. Another one of those, in naval aviation, we've been very successful. We talked about standardization earlier, but where does standardization begin? At NSOC, and now it's I've dated myself. But in Fallon, Nevada, in the Top Gun program. So we recommended, warfare development centers similar to what we have in Fallon, Nevada,
for every community.
Be created for every community.
Yeah,
and it's nice 3 years later to go back and see every community has a warfare development center.
Absolutely, it's so critical. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that was kind of a good a fruit of that labor because you're absolutely right. Someone's got to hold the standard, and even a small. I know there was a little bit of chuckling in my world when there's 2 squadrons and 1 FRS, and you guys need a weapons school for HM. Yes, there are some things that need to be held to all. So that's really great that came from that. Okay, where'd you go after that, sir?
So after that, selected for flag. So was selected to be a 1-star Rear Admiral lower half, and I went to my very first flag job. So up to this point, if you're tracking things, had never done a job in the Pentagon, which I was very happy about. So received my orders, going to go to the Joint Staff and do Global Force Management. So I had to look and see, okay, what really is that? And basically it's the allocation of all forces across the forces, platforms, people across the Joint Force. And so, I said, okay, that, finally caught up with me, going to the Pentagon. No, you're not in the Pentagon. You're in Norfolk, Virginia. And so my wife and I moved into Norfolk, Virginia, lived in a beautiful house, with other flag officers in the neighborhood. And I thought, man, I've done it again. I've avoided the Pentagon. On my third day in the job, I had a civilian deputy who had been there forever, and came in one morning. He said, "Hey, sir, forgot to tell you, we have to go to D.C. this week, and we'll just work out of the D.C. office." And I said, "The what?" And he said, "The D.C. office. You've got 2 offices." And so during that tour, I probably spent half my time commuting, sometimes up and back from Norfolk to D.C. to back in a day, other times 2, 3, 4 days. But again, learned a lot about the Navy. Sat down with my boss after about 3 months. He said, "Hey, I want to make sure you know something." I said, "What's that?" He said, "You're not going to be here for a day over 1 year because we're going to do away with your billet in the job. We're going to civilianize it." I'm like, "Okay, great."
Really?
So did that for a year, went through an entire cycle, and learned a lot about a lot, and then was ready to move on. And I was rewarded with that by going to Joint Task Force Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Yes, sir. Before you get there, though, you kind of breeze past, I think, what is a huge moment, which is making flag. I have no idea what that's like. What does that select? I mean, obviously, you're very aware of career timeline, career progression. You know that's something that's a possibility. But is it a board? Do you know how folks are even picked? Because it's a huge gulf from 06 to 07.
Yeah, and it's just like any other rank progression. You're selected in a board. It's a competitive process, and Lord knows what happens behind the closed doors. I never really expected it. I never really wanted it. It was one of those things where, again, I was just looking for opportunities to do something that I thought was meaningful. When I wake up in the morning, if I know that I'm going to go into work and I can make a difference somewhere, I'm happy with that. If I'm going in and it's just a punch the clock and think that I got to do this if I want to be competitive for the next thing, then it's time for me to look to do something else. So, I'd always enjoy that. And so it was a very pleasant surprise when, the word came out, and then, it's almost like you start from scratch. So you have one stripe on your uniform. It's thicker than an ensign stripe, but quite frankly, you're an ensign again.
How did you even get that? Was it a phone call? Was it an email? How do you find out that you made that?
This was kind of weird, and I'll tell you that some people find out through a rumor mill. Some people find out, different means. It was probably around Easter time frame, and typically with a nomination like this, it has to go through the Senate, and you get confirmed. And so a friend of mine sent me a message, and it was from the Senate confirmation page, so anybody can go there, and it was a bunch of people's names listed, and I was like, wow, that looks like a flag list. I mean, but nobody called me, nobody did anything. And so, we took that into our boss, retired 4-star Admiral Jim Hogg, the next day, and, showed him, and he said, "Congratulations, Admirals." And so that was kind of how I was notified. Wasn't the, the sexy phone call, the, handshake behind a curtain that I expected. But, at the end of the day, I was now an ensign in the flag wardroom again.
Sounds like primary how you found out where you were going.
Exactly. Yeah, there's kind of a trend here.
Yes, sir. I think there is. Guantanamo Bay. I think I mentioned to you before we got started, the tiny connection that I have to that island of Cuba is my, grandfather and obviously everyone beyond them. And then my dad was actually born there. I think he was 5 or 6 when they left, when Castro took over. But I've never been. I know nothing about the island. How long were you there? How long were your orders for?
So we were there 1 year. So Admiral Bill Moran was a CMP at the time, Chief of Naval Personnel. And
Absolutely.
He said, I've got 2 jobs that we're thinking about for you, this one and this job in Cuba. And he said, before you tell me what you're interested in, if you go to Cuba, your wife can go with you. It's a 1-year accompanied tour. And I said, hey, that, it sounds pretty cool, but I'm a P-3 guy. And he said, so am I. And I said, okay, but, I know nothing about prisons or detention centers. Or he goes, well, you'll learn. You're a smart guy. And so that's where we ended up. And I did, just a little training. And again, I mentioned Admiral Harry Harris earlier in the discussion. Admiral Harris was also a Joint Task Force commander down there, and he kindly gave me about 2 of his, precious hours. We had a Zoom call, and he walked through things I should read, things I should be aware of. This makes sense. Make sure you pay special attention to this. And even before I, put 1 foot down on the island, I felt like I kind of understood what I needed to watch out for. Didn't understand the job, didn't understand the politics, didn't understand, kind of the threats and, the people I'd be dealing with, but he gave me a really good background. So, I did media training. And the media is nothing to be afraid of. unless you're in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That was the most unpleasant experience that I had down there because, we would have media on the island once every other week. And so we would do 2 hours of media prep. We'd go through, and I had a great public affairs officer named Tom Gresbach, and Tom would sit down and walk me through, okay, here's what this periodical has written on in the past. Here's their trends. Here's what they're going to be focused on. And we would walk through, and they would drill me with, hypothetical questions. And nope, you gave too much there. Nope, that's not correct. You want to back this off. So, really good training for what it was always an adversarial group that came in.
Sure. Yeah, that's got to be. Is there a reason that we have a 1-star in that job just because it's so high visibility, so important? I'm guessing.
It is, in my sense. So when I showed up in Guantanamo, at the height, there were 750 plus detainees that were there. The facilities have been modernized. When I showed up, I think we had 156 detainees. The Obama administration was, trying to downside and transfer as many as they could to host countries. So when I left, I think we had just over 100. But there's so much. I would write a weekly update as the commander that would go to my boss in Miami, General John Kelly, who was a Southcom commander, and he would turn that around and it would go directly to the Secretary of Defense, and I believe it went to the National Security Advisor. So, really, really high visibility. And, I talked earlier about there's no such place as a zero defect mentality. Well, I just found number 2 within a matter of years. So, highly politically charged. We would host congressional delegations that would come down. And, the thing you have to understand about Guantanamo is we have people who are there. And, I can tell you firsthand, after reading intelligence reports on each one of them, there are no innocent farmers down there. There are no school teachers who were, ripped out of a UNICEF schoolhouse down there. They're all bad people to one respect or another. But, the thing that we were proud of is, we had a mission to do, and this was another one of those non-political missions. You were directed to, provide care, safe and humane treatment of all the detainees under your charge. And we had, just about I think it was 800 people who were in the task force. And a lot of those folks were reservists who came in. They would be away from their family from anywhere from 6 months to a year. And, if you worked in the detention centers, so the jails, if you will, and, you were in contact with the detainees, the treatment from the detainees to the American corpsmen, the medical experts, or the master-at-arms, the guards, was apparent. It was terrible. It was, we were the victims while we were there. And I was really proud of the fact that, we worked real hard to be professional, to be American, show them what strong and tough really looked like. And we never had an incident where we lashed out or we, took it back out on the detainees, despite some pretty, terrible things that they would do.
Sure. And I know a lot of folks that a real good friend is a police officer, and he says, people think what I do as a job is what they see on a TV show. Mm-hmm. People think that military aviators, Top Gun's about to come out, they think Top Gun is the military. Not even close. Same thing, those that have seen dramatized versions in TV shows about what that place is, I would hope would realize that is not reality. That is a television program. The people that work there, like yourself, that had to do that job are the ones whose opinion, frankly, I'm going to listen to, not what a dramatization is, I guess, on TV. And that's really the only view I think most of us have. I mean, I know, obviously, it's a communist island. We have we have Guantanamo Bay, and as I understand, we still pay the Cuban government for it. It's we send a check every so often, something along those lines.
It's not very much. In my history, I used to be able to give a great tour, but we rented it for some ridiculous amount of money, and the Cubans were too proud to raise that or change it, and so we still pay them some ridiculously low amount of money every month. And we would have a meeting with kind of our Cuban leaderships that were outside the gate once a month. I get to attend a couple of those, and
really?
Nothing adversarial, nothing negative. And as I told you before we started our interview, we actually had special category residents, when we lived there that had come over from Cuba, because at one time, Guantanamo Bay was an open base, and you would have a majority of your labor force that would come in, folks who worked at restaurants, at the commissary. They would come in during the day. They would leave at night. And then when relationships became strained, there were a couple dozen of those folks, probably at the height, maybe 3 or 4 dozen, who remained to stay there on the base. And they've got an area on that base, and we had our first temporary house, right amongst them. And, you'd walk the dog on a Saturday, and, it'd already be 95 degrees at 10 a.m. in the morning. But, there would be the Cuban Special Category residents, and they'd have old 1950 cars that were just fixed up to the nines, and they'd listen to their old-fashioned radios and listen to, Radio Free Cuba or whatever they were listening to. Yeah. So it was kind of a neat experience.
I guess one of the things I wanted to make sure I clarified, you're commander of the task force, but obviously there's the base itself. There's multiple services, multiple different entities that work for you. Is that a fair characterization of kind of the way everything works there?
Yeah, absolutely. So really small base. There's actually 2 sections of the base. There's an airfield side, and in order to get to main side, as we called it, you had to take a ferry. So you took a ferry across, or I had a Coast Guard detachment that worked for me, so we had some fast patrol boats that I'd jump on. We had a nice little dock in the backyard. I could jump on that. We could sneak over and cut down some of the transit time. But you'd have the airfield side fully manned with air traffic controllers, and then you come over to main side, and it was a small base. There was a power plant that was there. Guantanamo used to be a significant fleet training spot. Not so much anymore. I think in the year that we were there, we had 1 submarine that pulled in and maybe 2 gray ships. So pretty quiet from that perspective.
You have a deep water port, though. I didn't realize it was. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
Man,
Absolutely.
A very, very capable place.
And so, there were probably 3 restaurants. There was a McDonald's. There was a very small commissary. And it was kind of like the show Chopped. You would go to the commissary and they would give you 7 things, and you'd have to figure out what you could make with it from dinner. But you knew everybody. It was a small community. We graduated. I was a speaker at the high school graduation for 8 young, fine Americans who went back and went to college after that. But it was a great place to live, but very separate from the Joint Task Force. So it was about a 15-minute drive for me over the hills on a very isolated part of the island and the base, and that's where we worked. We had a Joint Task Force headquarters, and we had several different prison facilities where the detainees would stay.
Sure. For folks that will never get to, maybe visit is the wrong word, but will never get to spend any time there, what would you say? I think we talked about it before, maybe things that are misunderstood. Maybe something that's in the American psyche or people think they understand but is not even close to the truth. What would you say, something if you were talking to someone that had no background on Gitmo? Yeah,
so again, 2 different places. The main side, the base, is kind of like Mayberry. We didn't lock our doors. Everybody knew everybody else. You would go out and, have a long chair out in front, and folks would just, socialize. It was a great place to be. As a matter of fact, people want to go back there. Because it's just that quiet place that, is hard to find in the United States. Now, the task force, on the other hand, I always used to, whenever I would have a congressional delegation come in, and this is when President Obama was looking to kind of downsize and move a bunch of people off, and actually his goal was to close. I would, look at the resumes of who was coming in, what senator, what congressman, and I would have one focus, and that was, hey, when you leave here at the end of the day, whether you agree or disagree with the mission, I want you to walk away being proud of the young men and the women who serve here. And we would talk in detail on what the detainees would do with, their waste, with, other things, to young men and women who are, maybe away from home for the first time. And they acted professionally. Our folks were good. General Kelly was an incredible supporter of everything that I wanted to do. So, one of the things we tried to instill was accountability. So if detainees do things to Americans, there's got to be accountability, and he was very good there. So, I always tried to impress with, how professional the young men and women, from the Coast Guard, from the Air Force, from the Marine Corps, from the Army, and from the Navy are, especially those who come in contact every day.
Absolutely. Best of our country. Mm-hmm. Okay. After Gitmo, where'd you go next?
So after Gitmo, I went back to the Maritime Patrol community, and I had my group commander job. So, at this point, the community had gone from 24 active duty squadrons, 26 actually, down to 14, and I was able to come in just at the time where we were about halfway through transition from P-3 to the P-8, so a Boeing 737 derivative. So we were going through that transition, occupied a lot of time, but we were also standing up the very first unmanned squadron in the Navy, VUP-19, which was a complete cultural mindset change on pilots want to fly to fly. They don't want to fly, to sit there to stick in a throttle in some remote place. And so, we did a lot of work, looking at career paths. We did a lot of work on how to employ that aircraft before we actually really got to employ it. So another great tour. Got to travel around, spend a lot of time with, the young men and women who are on deployment, doing the hard jobs. And, one thing was really cool, even though it was 25 years in my rearview mirror, every time I would visit a squadron, it was just like being back in VV-23 because, people still wanted to work hard. They were proud of what they did. It was their trade. It was their craft. And they were artful in, how they operated the airplane. But then they also wanted to get out and have fun and enjoy themselves. So that was the best part of the job, just seeing that, hey, we can have fun with what we do still.
For sure. Where do you even go from a job like that? I feel like at this point you're headed onward and upward, but where'd you go next after this?
So what I just heard was you're running out of runway there, old man.
Not at all, sir, but I'm thinking of the upper echelons of naval aviation leadership. There's only so many more jobs you can fill.
Yeah, so we ended up, and again, I didn't realize this at the time, but, I had been nominated for a job over in Belgium to be the Ops and Intelligence Coordinator. We had started to get our mind set on that, and all of a sudden we got a phone call and had an encrypted email from the guy who was down here in Pensacola, actually, and he said, hey, give me a call. And his job was Naval Education and Training Command. He was commander of, all of Naval Education and Training. And he said, hey, something just happened, and I think you're going to get a call from the Chief of Naval Personnel soon. And one thing worked out, and, this was a place, so prior to this tour, my final tour in the Navy, we didn't think we'd ever get back to Pensacola. It wasn't a place we'd thought about. I was here for a memorial service when I was a lieutenant, came back for a wing ceremony when I was in Gitmo, and then my son was winged here in 2016, so we were back for his wings and a ceremony. So, we didn't think, hey, there's no chance for this. But, sure enough, the Navy called us up, and, this was a place, unlike Gitmo, where I was completely unfamiliar, felt like I was outside of my comfort zone with detainee operations. Training and education was something that I've done for 30-some years. So I was really excited about the opportunity. And we just loved our tour here. There was a few curveballs, but I was responsible, for all of force development. As Admiral Burke, when he was the Chief of Naval Personnel, had kind of changed the focus. And so I was responsible for everything from street to fleet, as we called it. So started with recruiting command, so all of Navy recruiting, to our conduct at boot camp, so RTC Great Lakes, and then all the follow-on technical schools for our enlisted folks, some officer schools here and there, to include Navy Schools Command or Aviation Schools Command here in Pensacola.
How granular, how in the weeds can you get with that job? Because like you said, you're seeing so much. Is it just something where your staff essentially, I don't want to say problems, but brings you issues and says, hey, boss, we need a decision? Or is it something where you can be proactive and actually go out and, get your hands dirty?
Yeah. So my philosophy, number one, after doing this for a few years was you're only going to be successful if you learn how to delegate. And if you haven't learned how to delegate by that time, it's probably too late. So big fan of delegation, big fan of when in command. So, I had over a dozen 06 commanders who were in charge of different schoolhouse, different regimes, and I would trust them. And that same trust of my staff was, I had always been brought up that, hey, when you get hit by a school bus, nobody should know the difference. Everybody should be able to pick up, know what you were doing, and be focused and be able to carry on with the mission. And that's exactly, what we did. I felt it was incumbent on me to study, to learn, to listen so that I could add value as opposed to being, hey, the old man doesn't understand this. We briefed him last week. And so, I took a lot of pride and I spent a lot of time and effort in learning our business, learning, where we were strong, where we were weak. What's the difference between how the surface warfare community does it as opposed to aviation or the submarine community? So I spent, I was a voracious reader, voracious studier, went back and forth, asked a lot of questions. So I was inquisitive so I could be helpful and be part of the solution.
Sure. And you'd seen it now. Literally, I think that's kind of the strength of the program, the strength of our system in naval aviation, as you went from, I don't want to say the very bottom, but an entry level. You were trained, and now you're the one managing literally all the training.
Yeah.
broadly speaking, as I'm going to use the big air quotes here, technology. I really am an old man when I say this, but technology is obviously the kind of the future for, in many ways, naval aviation and training as well. I think a lot of folks, clicking on CBTs, reading slides, that seems to be in many ways the old way to do it. I'm a huge fan. I think we all are really of hands-on, putting your hands on actual, things and learning that way. But then again, I got to remember the folks that we're bringing into naval aviation on the enlisted side. There are folks literally, hey, here's a screwdriver, here's a hammer, how to use those very basic skills. You have to teach to such a wide cross-section, is I guess what I'm saying. Is that something that even at that level, as we train folks that we're managing, we're always thinking about basically, how do we start from the very baseline and bring someone to, like you said, to the fleet where they're actually going to go out and be on that gray ship and bring value to what they're doing? Yeah.
So to back up just a little, the very first time I was at our weapons tactics unit, the Navy had introduced computer-based training. And it's kind of a four-letter word for folks who have had to suffer through that. And for me, I quickly came to realize, hey, this is nothing more than taking the PowerPoint slides that instructors used to give in the classroom, taking away the instructor and saying, learn this on your own. And so when I got to Naval Education Training Commander NETC, we were under, kind of the new modernization effort. And so a couple things. Number one, folks realized that, we historically, we had provided a lot of technical training for kids who wouldn't make it past a first enlistment. And so that was wasted training. And if you do a lot of this training and you try to do it up front, then retention on that is going to be terrible. So we tried to target that. And, the slogan was Ready, Relevant Learning. And, really Ready, Relevant Learning, the concept is rich and the concept is spot on. It's providing the right training at the right time. And it's trying to, refocus from what is knowledge-based training, knowledge-based education. So think about when you're in the classroom and the instructor says, remember these three things, they're going to be on the test. That's memorization and knowledge-based training. But really, we're much more performance-based in how we learn these days. So think about simulations, think about gaming, think about, opportunities to provide repetition, and an opportunity to put hands-on. And that was kind of the focus. And I was there on the front end of that. We delivered, one course to the operational specialists. And quite frankly, I think the Navy is still learning on how we best do that, how we best deliver it, because, it's a huge change to what you and I grew up learning, from a training and education perspective.
Of course. How many years in the job?
So I was at NETC for 3 years. 3 years before I retired.
And it's not, I kind of think we mentioned earlier, EXO, you're there for a year and a half, then you fleet up. This is a job where you probably have a little bit of time on the front end to learn, but then you're in the job for that entire period.
Yeah,
is that a fair statement?
I had 4 days. So, back to the comment on, I felt it was important for me to read, to study, to understand, what I was responsible for. I was a commander. I was accountable for everything that happened. So I just didn't want to be that guy who sat back and said, hey, give me a read ahead before I brief the boss. I wanted to be the expert on it. And, it wasn't that I needed to do all the work because I had people I trusted to do the work, and they did a great job, but I needed to be able to support them when it came to some of those high-level events.
I've had other leaders tell me that pretty much anything over 06, 07, I don't know where it was, but they kind of said at a certain point, you have to be almost skeptical of everything people tell you, because the quote I've heard before, you're never going to hear the truth again, because people want to tell the boss good news. They don't want to necessarily tell the boss bad news. From your background, from all those jobs you'd held prior, did you kind of have, I don't want to say a healthy skepticism. I feel like I live with a healthy skepticism just in life in general. But is there sometimes where okay, I understand what you're saying, but I really need the unvarnished truth to make a decision? Or did you find people wanted to be open and honest and tell you what they were really thinking? Yeah, so the last part there, you have to engender trust in your folks. And, I did that. I think I did that in a couple ways. And, I always said, I don't always the good news. I want you to tell me the truth. And so part of that is, you have to be smart enough to know when somebody's BSing you. And you have to study, you have to do those things. You have to remember, hey, you were just in here 6 months ago. That's not what you told me then. What's changed? And then all of a sudden you get a long blank stare. But engendering trust in your folks to say, hey, we're in this together. We want to improve the mission. So, if we have a problem, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's solve a problem as opposed to, averting it and, trying to ignore it. You really, again, back to the what are you going to delegate to folks? Folks have to feel like, hey, you genuinely trust me with this. And when you tell me that bad news is okay,
but come with a solution that you genuinely believe that. First time, you shoot somebody in the forehead and they haul off their dead carcass in your office, that's the last time anybody tells you the truth. So I think a lot of that is, how you personally develop that with, the folks that are close around you.
Sure. You mentioned all that hard work, all that reading. Again, did it just come natural? You've always been so prepared for the jobs you'd taken on before in the Navy. This was just, I don't want to say a natural extension, but kind of a natural extension of everything you'd done up to that point. Is that a pretty fair statement?
Yeah, started with NATOPS. No NATOPS. Yep. NATOPS is your blue pill. And then, just kind of, that was a natural extension.
Big blue sleeping pill. I haven't heard that in a while. That's awesome. During that tour here, sir, I know you had a pretty significant event that went on, and that's honestly the reason I know your story. I was wondering, would you be willing to kind of talk us through that?
Yeah. So, up to this point, kind of an unusual career, and I think I can top that one. So I had been here for, probably 5.5 months. And had a significant accident. Ended up breaking 2 vertebrae in my back. Some pretty significant trauma to my spinal cord and in our residence. So, I have very little recollection of the accident, of being hauled away by EMS that night. I have some faint recollection of being, in a big loud X-ray machine and then falling asleep again, and really waking up probably 2 days later from surgery, where I realized I couldn't feel anything from the waist down. So, I guess long story, went one day from, being a healthy, active, 50-some-year-old dude who was used to doing everything for himself to a point where I couldn't even roll myself over in bed. And I can still remember the day I had an incredible neurosurgeon came in, 7 hours of surgery. He implanted, I think I have 2 7-inch titanium rods and enough screws in my back to start up my own hardware store whenever I need to get rid of those. But, he came in and he told me the news. He said, hey, I hate to tell you this, you're never going to get out of a wheelchair, ever. And I can remember distinctly thinking to myself, man, that sucks. But life presents challenges and, you're always going to get a curveball in the batter's box. And it's not what happens with that pitch, it's how you adjust with the next pitch. And so, I was in ICU for about a week. Couldn't roll over in bed by myself. Couldn't do really almost anything for myself. And, just kind of realized that, okay, it's time to make a decision and figure out what you want to do next, what you're going to do. And, there were kind of 2 obvious choices. Lay in bed, feel sorry for yourself, watch ESPN 8 the Ocho for the next whatever years. Or you can say, screw this, I'm going to defy the odds. I'm going to do as much as I can. I'm going to work hard and, find out what that next thing is. And so that's exactly what I did. Went through just over 5 weeks of very intense physical therapy, occupational therapy, and think about this. So when you're 35, 45, 55 years old, having to learn how to do everything from scratch. I had to teach myself how to walk again, and I did. I learned how to stand up on basically non-functioning legs, balance myself on a walker, and then, got to a point where, they taught me how to take a step. So when you take a step, you don't think about it. But, for a while I thought, okay, so weight on my right leg, bring the left hip forward, swing, foot down, even though you can't feel anything. And so I went through that, and, one night I just had this crazy epiphany. I'm like, you know what I want to do? I want to go back. I want to resume my duties. I want to go back on active duty. And I can remember my wife telling me, probably in a very patronizing way, she said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. You better go to sleep." But that became my motivation. So I wanted to go back, and ever since I was a young lieutenant, made the decision that I wanted to stay and make a difference. That's what I wanted to do. So I worked hard. There are a couple things there. I talked a lot about trusting your staff, trusting your people, trusting your crew, whoever that was. My staff ran naval education and training for about 8 weeks. I never looked at emails. I never took phone calls. I was busy, PTing and OTing. So they did that for me. And that was the validation that I didn't need, but it was really nice to see that, hey, that training that we had done, they understood commander's intent. They were able to get out there and do things and make things happen. And to this day, I will tell anybody, I had the best staff in the United States Navy. CNO, he didn't have anything on them. Vice CNO, not a thing. These guys were the superstars. So was able to work my way back, and at the time, again, a couple key names. Vice Admiral Bob Burke was Chief of Naval Personnel, and Bill Moran was the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. Again, we'd worked together before, and still to this day, I'm not sure whose final decision it was, but a lot of folks made the assumption that, hey, when are you going to medically retire? Well, they came back and said, you can do this as long as you want to do it. And so I got home, worked my way back up to where I could do some emails and make a phone call every now and then. Eventually, one morning a week, I'd go in. Then it was 3 mornings a week, and then I was back on full duty, air quotes, because I couldn't pass a physical fitness test. And I can remember Mark Ferrum, the Navy Times reporter, wrote an article on me, and he titled it "The Admiral That Leads from a Wheelchair." Now, Mark incorrectly in that article said I fell in my kitchen. That's not the case. I think I fell over some stairs, but it's irrelevant. The end result was the same. But that was kind of my inspiration. Is I want to get back. I want to get back in the fight. I want to be able to go out there and work with sailors again. And I was able to do that, for the last 2.5 years of my service.
Yes, sir. Well, you mentioned inspiration. Truly an inspirational story. I cannot imagine the headspace, how tough that has to be. I truly can't. I cannot put the words to it. But you made the decision, and you did it, and that's incredible is the only word I think I can use. How many years service when you retired?
35.
35. That's probably a pretty significant chunk of your life for sure. But I think the next job you got, we're in your museum right now, here at the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola. How did that even work out? How is it? I guess there's probably not a wanted ad looking for a director of the museum, but how did you get hooked up and pointed in this direction? Yeah,
so, just kind of a funny story. So Stills Gillum is the director of the museum. And,
yes, sir. Yeah.
He would come over to Quarters A. We would do AVCOT, so Aviation Commanding Officer Training Symposium. And I would always do an open house when a class was in session. So these are future commanding officers that would come through. And, I'd give them my, Cozad's 15 minutes on leadership, talk to them about the importance of flying, talk to them about the importance of leadership, of empathy, and, we talked about captain, but we talked about a variety of things. And, one night he says, hey, I think the president of the foundation is, looking to retire in the next year. Would you be interested? And, he and I worked closely together while I was on active duty. And, even when he was on active duty, I said, I'd love it. So I made a few phone calls and put some inquiries out. And, right time, right place, right thing, and it all fell together. And, we never had any vision of retiring in Pensacola, Florida, but, there were a couple things. Number one, this is an incredible community. Anybody, every naval aviator has been here before. Some have fond memories, some don't. But I'm telling you, there is no better community in the United States that supports our Navy like Pensacola. And we found that out, both professionally but also personally after our accident. And when this opportunity came up, we jumped at it. This is what we wanted to do. It was a great opportunity to stay, part of naval aviation without having to put up with the things like flight hour shortages and sending your JOs on hard fills and, doing things like this. I get to do all the cool stuff
for
with
sure.
Naval aviation and, tell the stories of, common people who do uncommon things.
As president, what does the day-to-day look like for you? Because I know obviously after the attack in, I want to make sure I get the year right, 2019.
December 6, 2019.
Yep, the day I don't think anyone's going to forget. The civilian access to the base has been, I'm going to say cut off entirely, but curtailed pretty severely. So it's a little different from the museum at Wright Pat. Number one, it's better. I'm just going to throw that out there. But fantastic place. There's so much history here, but it's hard for folks to get on base to appreciate it and enjoy it. But what does the day-to-day look like for you right now, as I assume everyone's still trying to solve that really important problem?
Yeah, so that's my number one strategic priority is we've got to get folks back on the base. Back in the day, we'll call normal good times a point where we were at 725,000 visitors a year. Last year, we were at 200,000. And, for a museum that doesn't charge admission, doesn't charge parking, visitors are our lifeblood. And so, we're working closely with the base. We have some solutions. I've been very proactive in advocating and getting out there, sharing ideas, becoming involved with the community, Florida Department of Transportation. So it's a matter of time. It's a Navy decision, and so I just can't wave a wand and do anything. We're working closely with Captain Shishadi, who's a base CO, we're working with his region commander, and we want to be able to push something up so we can restore that. Because right now, if you think about it, and I'll give you two little stories. A family from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, reached out, and mom was an ICU nurse, had been fighting COVID patients, for the past 2.5 years. And she sends me this picture of two little boys with American flags, one with a Naval Academy T-shirt on, and two beautiful daughters, a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. And, basically it was, is there any way we can do this? And they couldn't spell Navy. And so, I worked through the security clearance problem. I sponsored them on myself. We brought them in. And those are the people who can't come to their National Naval Aviation Museum today. And those are the people who need to come, because they walked out of here and all three of their kids that visited that day said, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a pilot when I grow up. And so it's, my son didn't need to be convinced that being a pilot was, top shelf. He knew that. He got to see it. He got to grow up with it. But it's these people from, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from Idaho, from, Las Vegas, Nevada, who have never even seen the Navy. That's why this place is so important. So significant chunk of my time. But we're also, working hard to tell the story of naval aviation. And one of the coolest things, that we're doing right now is we're going to renovate our Hanoi Hilton Vietnam POW exhibit. So right now, it's nice, but it's dated, it's small. Next year, we're going to create a pretty interactive exhibit that folks will be able to go through. So next year marks the 50th anniversary of Operation Homecoming, where all the Patriots were, brought home and they returned with honor. And so we're going to honor that with, kind of some high-quality mock-ups of an interrogation room, of, kind of a shoot-down and a parachute, take them into an actual cell that looks like it came right out of the Hanoi Hilton. And then kind of the centerpiece of that exhibit will be an opportunity for you to talk with Commander Everett Alvarez, just like we're talking right now.
Wow.
So it's a digital mock-up. I was able to go to Hollywood while he filmed his interview. 3 days of hundreds of questions, where he sits in a chair and he tells his story. So for those who don't know, Everett Alvarez was the Navy's longest, POW, in prison for almost 8.5 years, as the Navy's longest prisoner of war. And he told his story, why he joined the Navy, how he was shot down, day-to-day routine, and it's incredible. But you'll be able to actually go in there, and through an artificial intelligent engine, it's going to sort through questions. And when you say, hey, sir, tell me about the day you were shot down, he's gonna be able to tell you exactly. I was the first to launch off Cat 1 at 12:45. Got airborne, rendezvoused with the rest of my formation. We went in, we did this. I got shot down, and tell his story. So, being able to capture that for, perpetuity is a really neat part of, being able to come to work and, again, tell that story of naval aviation for generations to come.
Yes, sir, for sure. You mentioned, I think that's the beauty of the blues and just air shows in general. It takes the airplanes to people. You're right, in the Midwest, on some of the coasts, they may not always necessarily be near a Navy presence. So the blues that are obviously based here at on Sherman Field, they bring that presence out to the community. But somewhere for people to come visit. I remember as a little kid, I'm from Tennessee. We'd come down to Gulf Shores over spring break, and we'd come to the base and watch the practices on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and come to the museum afterwards. It's a tradition, and I loved it. And I look back on it very fondly, because it's part of the reason I ended up joining the Navy and wanted to be a naval aviator and all that. And yeah, it does make me tremendously sad folks don't get to do that, but I also know y'all are working, I can only imagine, working tirelessly to fix that. You already kind of alluded to my next question, was what's kind of the future of the museum. Different aircraft as they come in. Obviously, I know we have a P-3 not too long ago that out on the flight line. There's other aircraft. I'm sure mine will soon be joining the ranks of aircraft that are part of naval aviation's past, the 53. How does it work? Is it something that you can call, nav air? Basically, there's examples, these airplanes that are going away, we want to preserve one, or how does that process work to bring aircraft into the museum?
Yeah, and we've got a great museum staff, all Navy employees, and typically, they'll go through the Navy staff and the naval aviation component of that staff, and they'll identify aircraft that either have some sort of historical provenance. So the P-3 you talked about was a VP-40 aircraft, the last active duty squadron. As a matter of fact, it's in my logbook over and over again, and so I have a personal mission to make sure we can do something appropriate with that. But we'll get lots of opportunities like that, and then it's really up to the museum staff to determine. So when you walk around the museum, the thing that's different between our museum and the World War II museum is their story's over. They don't have, a next generation, a next 100 years. And we're in the second century of naval aviation right now. So it's an artful game of being able to take new airplanes in, figure out what to do, whether that's, long-term loan some of the aircraft that are here right now so that we can continue to tell the story. Because long-term, my goal is, we need probably 2 more wings. We need to add on. We need to build. We need to do just like the Air Force Museum did and, continue to move out and out and out. That doesn't make sense until we can, solve base access. And again, over to my friend, the base CO, to be able to help us do that. But until that time, it's getting creative on where we can put these aircraft, so that we can tell the stories. And it's not, I tell people all the time, the thing I love about this museum are the aircraft, but the thing I really love about it, it's learning about the people who bring them to life. And, I said it earlier, but, it's common people who do uncommon things. Just like you, wearing the cloth of our nation, you could have gone on and done other things, but, you've chosen, to lead a life of service, whether that's a 10-year life, a 20-year life, or a 35-year life.
Absolutely. We talked about JG, but let's talk about all the way at the beginning, that day you walked into the Naval Academy. If you could look back and give that young man some advice, you've seen a lot. You've seen so much. And I think one thing that you mentioned, you talked about, you said, don't listen to me for career advice. I would say exactly the opposite. There is a golden path. We talk about in naval aviation a lot all the time. But that doesn't mean if you're not on that golden path, you still can't do great things. I think you're evidence of that, and your career is evidence of that. But what would you look back and tell yourself walking into the Naval Academy? I mean, you obviously had a very bright future, but anything that stands out or jumps out at you wish you'd known at the beginning? Anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, so no, I don't think so. I have no regrets in my career. I would say, number one, it all starts with hard work. You can't come in and assume you're entitled. Hey, you need to teach me. You need to work. My approach was, I always want to work harder than the guy on my right and the girl on my left. I want to do, I want to earn this all. The second thing is, and my wife and I kind of adopted this, but number one, have fun. But, we always asked ourselves. So, when we were in Canada and made the decision, we said, if we're going to continue to do this, and at that point we were a family of 5, so 3 little kids, and we said, okay, if we do another tour, we'll start to say no, and we'll look at doing other things when it's no longer fun, when it takes an unacceptable toll on the family, if you will, or I feel like I'm not contributing and I'm not making a difference. As long as I'm, the family is having fun and enjoying it, as long as I feel like I'm making a positive difference not for myself, but for my sailors, for the people that work with me, for me, and I'm having fun, we're going to continue to do this until, somebody says, time for you to go to the museum. And so that's where I am. That's what we'll do. And this is certainly our forever home.
That's so very, very cool. What a great way to end it. I always like to end this with you get the last word. So anything I didn't ask, anything I should have asked, any final thoughts before we wrap this up? No,
this is great. I appreciate it. And, the one thing I will say, this is a shameless plug. So, we talked about, my accident and my injury. And one of the things I was able to do, so less than a year after my accident and having that, doctor tell me I'd never get out of a chair, I was on Team Navy at the DoD Warrior Games. So I was able to do that, and I'd learned how to do things I'd never done before. That sounds a little ironic. Here I am, a paraplegic, but I'm doing things that I never did before. And so I have this propensity to try things. I'll make sure my wife doesn't listen, but I still want to go tandem skydiving. She's like, nope. She hasn't vetoed too many things, but, life is short. You got to reach out and do things. And, one of the things I wanted to do was share the story, talk about my experience, not be preachy, not tell people you need to do this, but hey, this worked for me, because I know, we're facing lots of suicides in our military right now and in society. People go through hard things, and whether that's an injury, whether it's an illness, whether it's just a hard time, you lost a job, marriage didn't work out. I think there are some nuggets in there that I share about, hey, this worked for me. And the coolest part about that is, Stroles Gillum is a good friend of mine, the director of the museum. And one night he was over and we were talking, and he goes, I don't know how you maintain your relentless positivity. So that's exactly what we're going to call the book, is Relentless Positivity. You got to keep a smile on your face. When one door closes, 2 more open. So I'm still marching on.
You mentioned the book. Last thought. You mentioned the book. When does it come out? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So every book that anybody who used to wear a uniform has to go through a clearance process, and we're doing that process right now. The book is about 99% done. We've got a cover art that's completed. The book's been edited, so we're really waiting on that. And one of two choices, would like to do it over Veterans Day, or if that doesn't work out, it's kind of got a nice theme for New Year's. So start your New Year's off, and here's the things you need to think about, and what you can do for yourself.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure I include, as the kids say, a link in the description so people can check that out. And when it finally hits the street, we can all get a copy.
Awesome.
Thank you again, sir, so much for all your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.